Welcome to TransformHer, the show where we ignite audacity and break barriers, equipping African women with tangible resources and practical insights on their journey to the C-suite or leadership in entrepreneurship. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back. On today's episode, I will be speaking to the magical Moji Hunponu Wusu. She is the founder of Woodhull Capital, a financial advisory firm. And our title for today is ACT, Leading Beyond Borders, Mojisola's Path to Global Excellence. Moji, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here.
This interview is long overdue. Let me start by congratulating you on 10 years of Woodhull Capital.
Thank you.
My God, you know, this is one of the interviews where I just want to just jump straight into it. 5 billion.
I know.
I had to ask myself, I read it twice. I said, 5 billion. Naira or dollars? And I started saying, okay, if it's dollars and some billionaires, okay, they say, a billion is a million of a. I was like blown away. And so my first question, impressive career in the UK, investment banking. And then you packed it all up and came back here. Unpack that for us, first of all.
Well, I started my career in the City of London.
Yes.
And I think 16 years ago, I met the most magical person. And I think in life, you always need that one person who senses or who decides intentionally that he sees something and wants the world to see it or share it. So I met a man called Mr. Segun Olokoti, who introduced me to a man called Mr. Akinshola Akinfenwa. And between the two of them, they convinced me to come back to Nigeria. And I was not having it. I moved to the UK when I was 15 years old. I met my husband in boarding school at 17 years old. And I had a child at the time. And I was just in the middle of living it up as an investment banker. And to everybody who starts in investment banking, your goal is to be the global head of XYZ, global head of something in Goldman's. And you're groomed and trained to want and desire those things. So here I was in the middle of my ascent to global head of something. And then I met these two men, and they changed my life forever. They saw a zeal, they saw a passion, and they wanted me to turn that passion into serving my own continent in Africa. And so they convinced me, and I was very reluctant, and they tried to show me the difference between working your way up a career and living for purpose and destiny. And I think they did a fantastic job. You need good mentors, and they, till today, are some of the most impressive and incredible people I've met in my whole entire life. And they brought me back to work in a bank in Nigeria. And not only did they bring me back, they mentored me. So they taught me the game, how to be young, audacious. And I was a very willing student too. I was willing to be trained. The fact that I worked abroad did not mean I knew the realities of existing and surviving in Africa in a Nigerian bank. So they taught me what I needed to do, when I needed to pipe low, and when I needed to use what I knew I had in me effectively to deliver value. They taught me how to focus on value.
This is amazing. So, ladies, we like to drop the nuggets, you know, as they say it. I mean, this is an Africa-wide program, but I can't help but quip my Nigerian side, see, as it be hot, you know. Mojisola said something. First thing she said is, you need good mentors. And then she spoke about how these mentors focused her. She also said it is one thing to just remain in a mundane career, right? Even if there seems to be trajectory, and another thing to live out purpose. And so Moji, Woodhull Capital, it's been 10 years, a whole decade.
Amazing.
I want to hear the journey, the transition from your banking career to Woodhull. I mean, how did the vision come about and the strategy? And on the back of that, I know this is a loaded question. I also want to understand I mean, I didn't quite think, or I don't imagine that 10 years ago, the Nigerian space was ready for investment banking in the true sense of the word. So please tell us the story.
Okay, so I started Woodhull 2014, and I think it's important that I say that I lost my job. And then in 2014 or 2013, and I've spoken about it before, I decided that it was time to continue the journey. And so sometimes you start off and you have a lot of people who support you. And then maybe there's a season when they're not as supportive. You must still continue the original journey. Maybe God sent them into your life to kickstart you. But you shouldn't feel entitled to their support all the way. The only person that owes you that is God. And so if you see things from that perspective, when that season for them to be full on is over, you'll cry, and I did. And you'd pray, and I did. And one day I woke up and I said to myself, get on with it. And so I went back to the original white paper, which was to bring funding into Africa, work with the international banks that I had the background. And I went back into the city, and I went back to some of the friends that I had along the way. And I said to them, I want to start this on my own. I had a chip on my shoulder because I had lost my job. I'd lost confidence in myself. And I felt that everyone was judging me because I lost my job. So I needed to get over that and unpack that chip off my shoulder. And it's very important because if you start business and you don't heal from some of those things, it could be divorce, it could be rejection, it could be anything. But you need to go and heal so that when you start off, you're wholesome. You may not be completely wholesome, but you're wholesome. So when you then work with other people, you're loving, you're understanding, you're empathetic, you get it. You can give them space to grow. And then you remember the lessons you learned and how people treated you. You make sure, I'm very conscious that I want to be that female boss that gives women genuinely and authentically a space. I don't be threatened that the younger people are coming. You can see I brought all of them in here today. Yesterday I was with an ambassador and I brought all the interns in my office. I want to be that older person that is not afraid that the younger ones are coming.
1 second, Moji. This is just, I told you she's a dynamite. Yes. I love how vulnerable you are in telling us that she lost her job. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with the hard knocks that life will definitely give you. It's not how many times you fall, but how many times you get up.
Yes. So I think I did a healing course called Master Life in Guiding Light Assembly.
Intentional.
I was very intentional about it because I knew I was sick. I was sick in my heart. And I wasn't angry with people. I was actually angry with God because I felt I'd done all the things that He asked me to do. Why did the results come out this way? And no one prepares you for the fact that you can try, no one's perfect, but you can try to do things the way you think should be done, and still things don't work out the way you think. And so I had to speak about all those things. And if anyone gets the opportunity to do the Master Life course, you actually get to speak to God on a daily basis. So you say what you say to God, what God says back to you. I don't want anyone to even read that booklet. I could never show anyone because I poured out my heart. And once I'd done that, I heard a voice. It's time. Go and set up a company. And I drove past a block of flats, residential, in the middle of Ikoyi. And something said, ask them if they have an office. And I was like, but this is a residential block. Eventually, I asked, it was a residential block, but there was an office there. So it wasn't a president. And we started Woodhull Capital in that building 10 years ago with a bunch of 2-3 NYC students who had moved back to the country. I knew I couldn't afford Goldman Sachs staff at that time. And I'm learning not to despise the days of humble beginnings. So I, rolled with these 3 children and we went knocking on different banks and companies, large corporates, and we asked them if they would give us a chance to raise international funding for them. Woodhull Capital raises international funding for banks, for corporates, and for governments. And over the last 10 years, we've raised $5 billion. And I know it's really impressive that whenever I say that in Nigeria, but if you think that that's a single transaction in the US, that $5 billion I've done over the last 10 years is a single transaction of a mid-sized trader, you see that there's so much.
But what's important is what you quipped, which is so key, which is never despise humble beginnings.
Absolutely.
The question is, in the area that we operate, who or how many have done what it is you do and have stayed the course? You know, women who come on this show, I describe them, and you're no different, as lady generals. They have been to war. And so what we like to do is say to you, show us your battle scars. What were the obstacles? What were the challenges you faced in setting up and running Woodhull Capital?
I think, you know, as I said to you, my mentors trained me on delivering value. Everyone likes value, even if you don't like the person, but if they have their value in what you want in their hands, they'll work with you. And I think a lot of women underestimate that. We spend a lot of time focusing on so many other things. If you focus on value, even those who don't like you would have to work with you because you have gold in your hand that they're trying to get out of you. So I think the biggest challenge, I would say, that people like me working in male-dominated, and not only is it male-dominated, international funding in Africa is alpha male-dominated. It means that you can be an investment banker, but with international funding, that perhaps is the creme de la creme of international funding or investment banking. So earning your spots on the table, and you will go to battle. And if they see that you're still around, I think a lot of them were shocked that I didn't move back to the UK. So I always say to people, never run away. Never run away. Stay, cry, moan, speak to people, heal, but never run away. Always leave when it's your time, your choice. And so the first mark of respect after losing my job is that they're like, she's still around. This London girl who we brought, she didn't go back. And that instantly earned me my respect. They saw that it was beyond what anybody had done for me. It was purpose inside of me.
Right.
And so if nobody brought me there, nobody can ask me to go back, right? And I had to prove it to myself, first and foremost, and then prove it to myself. The second thing is that I had tied my identity around my career. I was Moji Goldman's and Moji Investment Bank, and everyone knew me as that.
Right.
And I had to unbottle myself from that. My purpose is not where I work, is within me.
Right.
And I had to divorce that tag that I was proud of. And I didn't realize that I had even believed it and taken it in. So I had to say to myself, you're not Moji Goldman's. You're not Moji Investment Banking. You're Moji Hunponu Wusu with a purpose. Right. And that purpose will be achieved wherever you are, whether you're working in a glamorous high tier 1 bank or not. That gives you the confidence to go and start your own business. Because then you realize that it's inside you. So you don't need a tag you don't even need to be associated with someone. Do you know the interesting thing? When I started Woodhull Capital,
yes,
I tried to get a chairman. I didn't realize I was doing it all over again. I was looking for validation and refusing to see that the purpose was inside me. And I spoke to a senior friend of mine and I said, I'm thinking of getting a chairman. And he said, why do you want a chairman? I said, because then when people are reading the brochure, he said, Moji, you're good enough. We raised funding through you and you haven't had a chairman and it didn't matter to us. Don't lease out your vision. Prove it to yourself over and over again so that when you do get a board later on.
I wish I had a bell. I'm sorry. Did you hear that? Do not lease out your vision. We're still on the topic of her scars, obstacles, challenges that she faced. But Moji said something. She said, do not run away. Welcome back, ladies and the few good men watching. Before the break, we were speaking to Moji Hunponu Wusu, the founder of Woodhull Capital. And we're back, still speaking to Moji. So more about your challenges.
So I had to then say to myself, and the self-belief is so important, that I'm good enough, that I am enough, and I will get people, but I needed to be able to prove that, close deals, and realize that it's inside of me. Now we have a chairman and we have a board, and the chairman of Woodhull Capital is a guy who brought me back to Nigeria.
Fantastic.
Mr. Kishola Kifemwa. And when I went to him to say, I'm ready to get a chairman, he said, I'll do anything to support you. I've watched you, I know you, and I will be there to support you. So it's important at what point you go and engage. And you must engage when you've proven to yourself, when you're wholesome, as I said, in yourself, and when you also have something to say and something to offer those who you're coming to asking to come on the table with you. So it's important for young people to know that they're enough. You must prove to yourself that you're enough. You must go away and go on your track record. A lot of people say, how come I've never heard of Woodhull Capital? I said, because I was building. When you're building, perhaps what you're building is not a time for visibility. You need to be able to build, fail, rise, stand, jump, whatever it is, and actually have an authentic story. The other thing I'll say, one of the challenges is I've suffered because I haven't chosen to take the elevator, and I've chosen to take the steps. I'm okay with taking the steps because life is not a race, and women will suffer because somebody will give you a shortcut. If you don't take it, you'll have to take the steps. Take the steps. On the steps to the 13th floor, you meet the lady who sells tom-tom. You'll meet the lady who sells akara. You'll meet the GM. You'll meet that. What's the rush? And so when you're given that leg up, you'll be punished because everyone should say, why didn't you take that leg up? But the price. And I say to young people, particularly to women, pay the price.
The most important point that she made is that if you compromise and you take the shortcut, it is sure to come back and bite you. So sometimes the destination is not all that there is to it, right? The journey, the process is very key. And long and hard sometimes is the only way. Now, Moji, your expansion into London, Dubai, Abuja, not forgetting the 5 billion we've raised in 10 years. Wow. This is something. What factors contributed to this expansion? Not forgetting that you have 100% customer retention.
So, I spoke about taking the stairs.
Yes.
The other thing it does is you build a network when you've gone on the stairways. So you've met everybody in the system, right? Although you had the access to the 13th floor. You've met people on the first floor, the third floor, the fifth floor. You build a network. People leave those organizations and go to other organizations. And then you build a global network. If you always take the elevator, the only people you know is the lift guy and then people on the 13th floor. But if you don't build a network of people, when people move, when the 13th floor changes, your business ends. And perhaps this is why people don't have intergenerational business, because you focus on the one person and you ignore everybody else along the way. But if you know people on the first floor, who in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time will become the MDs, people on the third floor, people on the fifth floor, people in risk management who are saying, I know Moji, she's been around, she's done this for so long. They will be spreading your story without you even coming on TV or having intentional visibility. So expanding to different countries, you'd find that you have a network of various people that have moved, that known you, that have bumped into you along the way. And in 2019, I decided to open an office in London, back to where I started. And I think that was the most emotional thing, because I left as an employee and I came back as an owner, and just going and viewing and visiting offices, it was so surreal. It was remarkably surreal. I'm coming back to own an office right next to the masters, the greats, the Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan. It is something, I don't know, electricity still goes through my body.
Of course.
And you just think, oh my goodness, wow, this is actually happening. It's important also to tell the university students, take your dissertation seriously. Your dissertation is a roadmap, actually. It's an unconscious roadmap. You think you're doing it just to get your degree. But when I looked back maybe 5 years later, it was all in my dissertation. How to attract funding into Africa, how to attract international funding into Africa. So the seed was in me. And so I decided to open one in London I took a whole bunch of young people and we opened our offices in London. Once you get the bug of expansion, you can't stop because then something else is driving you, and that's that vision. So in 2020, in the middle of COVID, we decided to open an office in Dubai, in the DIFC, the Alpha and Currency House in Dubai. And so I did that. And then very strangely, I felt that I needed to come back to Lagos to expand again, and then move to Abuja to expand, to set up a sovereign and sub-sovereign desk to fund governments, not only the Nigerian government, but to fund governments across Africa. And we wanted to be positioned. And I will say this because a lot of people say, yeah, she probably knows. I don't know a single politician. I don't know a single person. But the vision, as I said, is inside of me. I thought about it in 2021, and I moved to Abuja for 3 or 4 months, and I didn't get a headspace. So I came back to London, and I continued normal business. And then this year, I brought it out again, and I opened an office, a sovereign and sub-sovereign desk in Abuja. There are 4 staff there, setting up, and I moved to Abuja, and I live in Abuja. And I'm putting my purpose where my mouth is, putting everything into it, and just sitting closer to those who you want to influence, who you feel that you have solutions. And remember, adding value, having a value proposition. Eventually, I know that we'll do great things. We've started speaking to some of the sovereigns or sub-sovereigns. And I don't know if you were aware that we did a corporate assembly with Lagos State a few weeks ago to celebrate our 10th anniversary. And we're thinking of doing something with 36 states to expose them to some of the international investors that are on our road deck. Incidentally, and I'll say this, once you start working on purpose, one of the Middle Eastern governments approached us a few weeks ago and asked us to work with them. So it's not having everything complete. You should have a plan. You shouldn't just go there with passion and vision. You should have a plan. But once you've gotten that plan, you need to step out in faith. It's not always going to be pretty. It's not always going to be all worked out for you. Even if you've achieved so much in Lagos, in London, in Dubai, when you have to start again, you have to start again. And you take with an entrepreneurial spirit. So important.
Thank you. So you see what Moji is saying, that, and this is what Nelson Mandela said, it seems impossible until it has been done. We could sit here and talk the whole day. But there's one very important question that I want to ask you on how the values of integrity and professionalism have conditioned your leadership style.
It's important to, remember where you're coming from. I had to build this from pain, and I've remembered, and I'm turning my pain into purpose. I always say this. The second thing I think is you must stand for something. A lot of leaders don't stand for anything. They just want to be successful. They just want to build a firm. There must be a value system that underpins the why. You're always on deck, right? And you must stand for something. You can't move because this is going to make this deal go through. And even the people you are moving around, they can see that you're a chameleon. So you must stand for something. You must pay the price for standing for that thing. And then you graduate onto the next level. So I think what is lacking is there are so many flaky leaders, and they can't pass on anything because they don't stand for anything. You must stand for something. There's a price to standing for that. But after you've won that battle, you then get the respect. And then you confirm and affirm to yourself that I truly stand for this.
Fantastic. Wow. So, as I say, after some interviews, Moji is definitely coming back. There's no way she can unpack this powerhouse in 30 minutes. But just to wrap this episode up, Moji said you must stand for something. If you don't stand for something as a leader, you will definitely fall for anything. It's been a great pleasure on this episode. Please stay tuned for our next segment, which is our coaching segment. Welcome to another coaching episode on TransformHer. Last week, we began the very important topic of restraint. Restraint is one of the 5 facets in the character dimension of executive presence. Remember, effective communication is what makes you a good leader and what inspires the people that you lead and your teams to your desired action and outcomes. And so I asked the very pertinent question, can Onyade change how she is wired? And the reason I ask this question is because oftentimes we react emotionally and subconsciously. And so there are leaders who will say, that's just who I am. After all, you have asked me to be an authentic leader in my communication. But you must realize that you have a diverse team and you must be able to inspire and effectively communicate with every member of your team. This means equanimity, emotional intelligence. You must take everyone into consideration. And so back to the question, can Onyade change how she is wired? The answer is yes, she can do so. What she needs to do is she needs to be intentional and become more self-aware so that she knows when to respond in moderation. And of course, she has to be an active listener as a leader. Most importantly, she needs to unpack situation by situation. This means she needs to read the room, paying close attention to the dynamics of the interaction in the room. Initially, Onyade, in spite of her practical wisdom and sound technical knowledge, was accused of being overeager, and it made some of her team members anxious. And then in response, she now went to the far side of restraint and became overly reserved, and she came across as aloof and less than assertive. It is important as a leader that you read the room, understand the dynamics of the interaction in the room, and then moderately respond to each situation or person. And how can you do this? By actively listening. Now, beyond listening, remember that body language communicates far more than the words that people speak oftentimes. So you must train yourself to the point where you are actually looking as well as listening. But just remember this, every time you think of restraint as a leader, moderation, moderation. So not too eager and not too aloof, but communicating effectively such that you assert the fact that you are the leader, you share the vision clearly, and you inspire your team to action. Until next time, when we'll still be talking about restraint, it's goodbye.